Okay, our next speaker is Brandan Espe. So Brandan is an ecologist who curates the living collections of James Cook University. In recent years, his focus has been around myrtle rust and threatened species of North Queensland, carrying out field collections and surveys. And I've been hearing about Brandan and his enthusiastic and amazing approach to this for a couple of years, and I even saw him on the news the other day. So I'm excited to hear his talk. Thanks, Brandan.
All right, hopefully I press the right buttons. First, I want to thank Mallory, my environmental officer. Without her, I would get way too distracted and nothing would get done. So moving on from there. The outline of my presentation is around the ecological conservation in the north and ex situ representation, which is, as you'll hear obviously in the next slide, not particularly well done. Also, why universities make great botanic gardens. It's not a fight with botanic gardens. Calm down, okay. The next one is the universities and botanic gardens, the chicken and egg scenario. I actually didn't know about this until I looked into it, so I'm really excited to share that. And the last one is James Cook University, where very exciting conversation. Hallelujah. And the next one's about James Cook University. As like a case study for what we're doing. Lots of pretty pictures. If you have questions about them, ask me later. So Northern Australia, the first big thing that you'll come across is, unlike the more developed sort of eastern regions of the south, you've got the Royal Melbourne, the Royal Sydney, and then the not Royal Queensland. So there's no real state level botanic garden in Queensland. Even Mount Coot-tha, which is typically regarded as our larger botanic garden, is still actually council. So there's limitations with that around permitting and around areas covered, with typical botanic gardens covering local LGAs. And if you're looking at an area like Cape York, there's almost no botanic gardens. You've got Cooktown and they can't cover the entire region. So it's really thinly stretched in those regions. You've also got these really vague sort of herbaria collections. I'll touch on that in a minute. There's a few specimens in particular to draw from that. And like the rest of Australia, we have these really unique species and really unique genera scattered all over the place, as well as a bunch of new ones. And we have these things called crocodiles, that infest the rivers and make it really hard to collect things in swamps, which is where all the cool things are. Like orchids. So 3 threatened tropical examples that are quite close to me personally. Tetramalopium ornans was only described last year by Lorna Ngugi, and it's a super rare daisy. It's found on cliffs. Its only other relative is on Kosciuszko, and the entire genus is actually threatened around the whole world, with extinctions occurring across the genus. So super archaic daisy. Acacia lumholtzii, I'm arguing the common name. We call it the fire tip wattle. I mean, look at that. But it's commonly referred to as the Gilligan wattle based on its location within that national park. It was only known from 4 records, and until recently, thanks to Tegan's team, was actually listed as vulnerable and is now critically endangered, coming only from the southeastern side of a single mountain and not being in cultivation because it is really challenging to grow, shockingly. The last one's Kunzia truncata. Personal favourite of mine, found near my parents' property. It was known from the type collection in 1991, where the description was 30 or so plants. We went back there and we found 47 and no real recruitment, so we think that was the original count. So it's not a great species, especially since there's only 2 collections ever. Thankfully, we do have 2 of these in cultivation now, so we're super excited by that. So ex situ conservation and the benefits for a university. Living laboratories is a really big thing. So teaching environments, being able to offer our students really immersive systems. For a student to say, oh mum, I went to a practical today and I held one of the last 30 plants of a species, is a really cool and engaging methodology. Another really good one for the benefits for universities is obviously, like you actually just mentioned, media. We get to post about social things and look like we're doing things. I mean, we're doing things for sure. The other side to that is it's a really unique learning experience. If you look at something like a seed, if you think of biology, falling and wind dispersal, seeing a video of that versus seeing a tree do it in front of you is a really different experience. So it's much more engaging for our students. which then help the future generations. So the roles of botanic gardens and universities also actually quite align. We're all interested in education, we're all interested in conservation, we're interested in bringing new species, we're helping understand what the natural environment needs, ecological niches, the limitations of the environment. We're all about public engagement, in our case more student engagement, who then go on to involve the public. So there's a lot of similarities between universities and botanic gardens. In particular, we're all kleptomaniacs. I've seen the academics' offices, they're kleptomaniacs, it's true. I'm one too. So can all universities really compare, or could universities compare to botanic gardens? This is the part that shocked me, that the first botanic garden actually came off of a university. So we came first. Since then, there's been this sort of cyclic approach where universities, to my understanding, seem to stay out of the conservation side directly of cultivation, leaving it more so to botanic gardens in Australia. But I think that trend's really shifting a lot, and a lot of universities are now getting involved in the ex situ and the hands-on side of conservation, not just the research side of conservation. Another great example for it is that universities often carry out field surveys, as we've learnt about GENS obviously, carrying out threatened species assessments, working out conservation biology. Joe here's looking at CAM. One day I'll know what that is. Miles here is collecting some Cardomia. It's a threatened arid land species. I'm playing with some of James's cycads without him knowing. So we're really doing similar things to botanic garden groups anyway, and there's no reason we can't adapt into growing them. In particular, since universities have that same longevity, being a semi-state body as botanic gardens, so we can retain collections long term and we can retain data. The big difference with us is that we have more people. We have ethnobotanists like Jerry, we have botanists and taxonomists like Darren, we have horticulturalists, we have entomologists, we have zoologists, we have ecologists, we have social scientists. We've got this massive myriad of people. So if we come across an issue, we can just walk down the hallway and bang on someone's door. So James Cook University and our living collection, we're really excited about this one, that we have the living collection curatorial plan. This is our little magnum opus for now. We definitely ripped off the AMPC germplasm guidelines for a lot of this. Thank you for that. That saved a lot of work. It was great to steal from that. We've got some collaboration here in the image. You've got Stuart from the Australian Tropical Herbarium. You've also got people from Cranbourne in Victoria and the AMBG, where we went on a trip to Mount Lewis where Stuart broke his ribs. But more importantly, we got the plants. Don't worry, it was a success. We've got the living laboratory now written into our master plan. This is actually a 50-year committed strategy from the university that actually says we are going to have not only teaching laboratories, so gardens that are exciting, but it actually has threatened species and traditional use plants written into the strategic document at that level, which we can then use to develop and implement our programs. So that was really exciting for us, and a really big nursery. On the ground, we have a really strong impact with student engagement. So Shelley, one of our students, is working with the critically endangered Bacchausia tetraptera, less than 200 individuals in the wild, impacted from myrtle rust. So we're collecting them and growing them on campus and seeing how they go. We've got Eucalyptus petaglauca, a vulnerable local species, which we've actually had fruit on multiple occasions, along with multiple mutaceous and rare species of the Myrtle Project. So it's really exciting that we can get all of these threatened species into the ground, into gardens. The last image on the far side looks like a conventional garden, with the exception of the boring old cordyline and the Dorianthes. Everything in there is actually a vulnerable, endangered or critically endangered species, including the hedge. It's actually Sanantha papulosa, which now fruits so prolifically that the local land care is able to grow thousands of specimens off just that hedge. So it's insane. JCU trials were kind of like a grow me instead sort of initiative. I think almost every botanic garden has tried doing one of these, and some have been hugely successful, of like raising rarity, another good example, where one of our programs was going to different areas and finding really unique species that have cultivation value or potential in landscaping as something to grow alternatively. Weeds, like with the rest of Australia, are a major threat in Northern Australia. In particular, things like alamandra or the Captain Cook bush, which looks exactly like a lot of our natives. So we kept hearing this rumour that, oh, we just can't grow it, or oh, you can't source it. And so for us, it was really important to go and find and source these species and try and get them into cultivation. Here we have Nepenthes mirabilis. This photo was actually taken on a survey with Chris Roach, who's hiding somewhere. It's a carnivorous plant local to our region. It was poached sporadically, but it's actually super easy to cultivate in mass, so there's no reason to poach it. Eucryphia, this is actually one stolen from Darren's Tromp's project, another species he spoke about earlier, so I'll skip that. Noadendron, really colourful, pretty leaves, another endangered species only known from a small gully, and Freycinetia percostata, which is a really attractive vining species that grows almost bloody anywhere. The Threatened Species Project is the key to what we do. It's a program that started back in 2020 and kind of branched off of the Myrtle project, which will be next, and we pretty much go through and assess the rarest plants of our region. We've not been greedy. We've made sure not to touch the south. We stick to Mackay North. Rush it up. And we go out and survey these species. We palm information off to Tegan, who can then use them for reassessments to put them into the CAM listing, and like other of her staff and team have spoken about earlier, and use that information for conservation. But we also collect ex situ propagules from these to put into conservation, figure out how to grow them, and then share material with other individuals or groups, such as the Royal Botanic Gardens, who have taken a fair few of our stock on, in particular our coleus they seem quite fond of, which is weird because they smell horrible. The Threatened Species Cycad Consortium was another one that we jumped into. James poached me into that one and conned me into growing a bunch of cycads. It wasn't hard, he just said dinosaur plants. So it's a really good way for other universities, I think, and smaller regional gardens to get into conservation programs, is that there are consortium groups out there that are well coordinated and well structured. So we were lucky we had the facilities in place, but a lot of nurseries and smaller botanic gardens and other universities have the capacity to jump onto these programs as kind of like a dip your toe in the water approach to conservation. And the Myrtle Rust Initiative, which was where we went through and found all these horribly infected things and collected them, and as you can see, grew them on quite nicely. And we actually have, through this program, found a myriad of new species like Syzygium glenum that were impacted by myrtle rust and not captured in earlier surveys. So it was really cool to be able to add to that data. Really sad to see that. But we're also able to capture the majority of these in ex situ and accession collections, which is really important because some of the populations, when we've returned to them, actually no longer exist. So we were quick enough to get in there. And this is actually an ongoing program funded by the university for the most part. So in summary, universities make really good botanic gardens. We're really adept at teaching. We are really good at collecting things. We understand how permits and licensing work. We have the expertise to carry these things out. And I strongly recommend other universities catch up and jump onto the board. I know some are doing this. I shouldn't joke about that one. We have had other universities reach out. So it's really exciting, but hopefully universities can help spread some of the weight that botanic gardens are facing for ex situ.
Great, Tommy. We'll take questions. We'll take questions at the end for this session. So if anyone has a question for Brandan, write it down and you can ask it at the end of this session. Is that cool?